Hello everyone, welcome back to Game Brigade. My name is Brian, and today we're going to be taking a look at The Witcher Path of Destiny by Go On Board. So this is The Witcher Path of Destiny from Go On Board. And the Go On Board asked me to do some coverage for Path of Destiny to give you guys some information regarding my opinion of the gameplay and overall system of how this works. This is a sponsored coverage, so I appreciate them for supporting my channel and giving me an opportunity to share my thoughts on The Witcher Path of Destiny. So I'm going to go over the overall system of how this game works, and then at the end of the video, I'm going to go over my cons, my pros, and what I could see some people not liking on this game, so you guys can make the best decision when you're backing this game going forward. And I'll give you some of my final thoughts as well, and based on what I like to see, hopefully when it comes to the project, because obviously I don't have preview of what the campaign will look like. So this, at its core, is a tableau building game with a narrative, story-driven element to it. So you are going to be one of the characters from the CD Projekt Red Witcher game that are very popular. So we have Geralt of Rivia, you have Ciri, Dandelion, I can't remember this guy's name. He's the another Witcher of the Wolf School. And you are going to be taking on these characters, and in these characters, they all have a unique player board with 4 unique powers or abilities that you can utilize through each individual game. And in this game, you are going to be playing a chapter from one of the stories that Geralt has experienced through his trials and tribulations through the land. So here we have the edge of the world. My prototype also include the Striga story and the Lesser Evil story. And we're going to be just doing this base one because it is the first game that they would recommend to play for new players. And I don't want to spoil anything in terms of this. I'm not going to really go into how the spoiling works, but we are going to talk about the narrative element to the game. So the way this works, players will flip over this binded book. It's not binded, but who knows? Maybe it will be. It's a book, effectively going over the detail. And here you will have some flavor text that players will read, and they'll go over some rules for you to have, and then some more flavor text, and then you will flip it over again. And now we're going to begin the game knowing what we have in terms of our dominating powers and our non-dominating powers. So what I mean by that is up here at the top, you'll see there's a sword and then there's an envelope for diplomacy. Those are the 2 paths that are part of the current story that we're playing in terms of how do we want to continue our story. Now, this is very much a choose your own adventure in a way, where the decisions that you make for what is the dominating power will dictate how the story plays out. And I believe each chapter has a total of 8 different endings for you to experience for replayability's sake. So how does this work? What am I meaning by these dominating and non-dominating? Well, right now there are 4 different types of icons that cards will have on them based on their magic, diplomacy, exploration, or combat. In each situation that we're doing with, when there's 2 different paths, we'll be dominating, 2 of those will be dominating. So this situation is either combat or diplomacy. So when we're playing cards from our hands, they will have these symbols on them, and we'll be gaining those symbols. And at the end of 3 turns, within 3 different rounds, we will calculate to see how many points we have and see which one is the dominating one, which will take our path. So let's give an example of what a turn looks like. So here we have the 3 players. I am Ciri, so I am second in place. This is the turn order track, but it's also the initiative track. So whoever is the highest will go first. These are the locations for where you can send your character to draft the cards on the table. The very bottom one also includes a bonus experience. We will talk about experience and how that works, as well as victory points later in this discussion. So let's say this character is going to come down here. He's going to draft these 2 cards, taking them to his hand, and also gaining his bonus victory point. Now it is my turn. I can decide what I want to do, and I'm going to go ahead and take this location, grabbing these 2 cards, adding them to my hand. And then Dandelion decides that he doesn't really matter what he's going to do. he's going to go up here and just take 2 random cards from the top of the deck and call it a day. Okay, so now in simultaneous order, so everyone will be doing this at the same time, you're going to look at your hand of cards and you're going to play 2 of them. You always play 2 cards unless you're using a power and ability that changes those rules. These power and abilities will let you know at what point in the steps you're allowed to use them. For example, now that we've done the drafting, the first step, we're now going into the playing cards, the second step, and some of these might say during playing cards, second step, I can trigger this ability and use and do it. So we're going to look at our hand and see how do we want to do something. So what I can do is I can, how do I want to do this? I could play, say, these 2 cards. And the order matters in terms of how you want to play it. So you're always going to trigger cards from left to right. So here I will play these 2 cards. First, my blue one, which is giving me a sword and a diplomacy token. And my second one is asking me to remove a sword. So we will put this token on top of my sword showing I removed it, but I'll gain 2 of whatever the left symbol is up here, which is actually swords. So I'll take 2 of these swords and add them to my supply. So I effectively removed a sword from my supply by covering this up, but I gained 1 in the process, so I'm a positive sword. Now that's how the mechanic works. The symbols that are not currently active, they're the non-active symbols. You can also remove those. They're not determining any point of the story. So that's something that you usually want to plan for in terms of what you want to do. And then down here at the bottom of the book, you will see that there are other symbols that are available. If this one is successful, let's say swords is successful, the next time we'll go, it's going to be magic and exploration will be the dominating cards. So it also can dictate what kind of cards you want to draft and keep in your hand and hold on to for future rounds. So that would be 1 turn. We will then fill out some more cards. We'll burn the top 2 cards, pushing everything up, and we'll keep drafting, playing cards from our hands, just like so, adding things to our system until we've done that 3 times. Also, alternatively, I forgot to mention this, after the first round, you will count, what do you have more of? Well, I have 2 swords. I have no envelopes, so I'm dominating swords. Let's say, for example, our friend Dandelion is down also on swords. So we have more swords than we have envelopes. We place this 1 to reference that swords are currently the path. But let's say the second round, it's envelopes. So now we have a split tie. So going into the 3rd round, it can go either or. Are we going to go diplomacy or are we going to go swords? Say for entertainment's sake, we decide to go combat. So now it's swords that is going to be the direction. It's combat. It's going to be where we're going to take this. So it says, if this occurs, you will go to page 6. So the way this works, alternatively, if it was diplomacy, you would go to page 10. So we're going to flip these books over until we get to page 6. We will then read the narrative explaining what happens because of the situation. And then we flip the book to go to the next section, which then discusses, okay, now because we did swords, it's going to be magic and exploration. The next round begins. In between that round, though, between this happens, there's a point where you must take apart your tableau. So the first round, you are going to choose 1 card to keep. So let's say I decide to keep the blue card here, and everything else gets trashed. So these are going to go away. The second round, alternatively though, we get to keep 2 cards from our tableau. In the 3rd round, you don't keep anything because there is no end of round in the 3rd round. It's the final scoring. So you do eventually, you're building up this tableau, but you are kind of breaking it down each round, keeping 1 card the first time, 2 cards the second time, okay? So let's talk about experience and victory points. Then we kind of wrap up with some of these alternative bonus features and alternative things that can be included in the game. So when you're doing the scoring, the way the scoring works in this game, at the end of a round, you're going to count up how many of the dominating points that you had as well as the non-dominating points. Let's say in this example, I had 5 swords and 2 envelopes, which were the previous round's tokens we were going for. Because swords combat won the overall amount in this situation, all of the sword tokens that I have are directly converted into victory points. I will take my token up here and move up to 5 to equal the 5 swords that I had. Alternatively, though, the non-winning element, in this situation it was the diplomacy, the envelopes, will be earning experience points. So because I had 2 diplomacy tokens, I will take that and score 2 experience. This track has little icons showing that once you reach this track, you will level up that token, alternatively going up to each one. When you reach 20 experience, the end of the track, your experience token actually will convert into a victory point token. The gold token will slide over, and now you will be earning victory points every time you earn experience. And it will cap at 20 points or 20 experience points, which is effectively 12 victory points will be the cap of how much you can totally earn on the second round of it. So that's basically how the game is going to go. Each round, you are going to play as many cards to get both of the tokens, because you're going to want both victory points and experience points. But alternatively, you also want to be the one that plays the most in a certain field, because there are internal rewards. So let's say I was the player that had the most swords at the table. I will earn this token, which means when I read the story, it'll say, I'll just read this one. The player with this token draws one of these exploration tokens. So I get a free resource going into next round. It's not a lot, but it's something to give you as a reward for doing something better than everyone else in that specific round. Okay, so over here I have things set up. We also have sliding under here some more stuff. These are alternative things that can be chapter specific. So based on what you're playing can change some of the rules that you're going to encounter. But I just want to kind of show some of the other depth items that are in the game. So here, Siri has a secret objective that she's going to be going for. And it says gain victory points depending on the number of yellow cards. It says on your hand, but I'm going to assume it's meaning in your hand. So basically what that means is at the end of the game, every yellow card that I decided not to play, so in this case I would have 2, those are worth additional victory points to a max of 5. So I have 5 cards in hand, I would be earning 5 victory points. Okay, put these back over here. Over here we have additional options. These were featured in the Striga one. These are asking you to play cards in a certain amount of colored ribbons. You'll notice at the top of the cards, we haven't really seen too much reference of what these ribbons, I haven't talked about them, but they are basically telling you what these cards fall into in the category. And if you play a certain amount, so let's say I have 3 green cards that I have totally played, I will trigger this thing. I don't have one of my tokens. I'll put a token here, which allows me to look at normally they'll be corresponding a little different, one of the hidden victory points that'll be available in the game. Now, these also don't always trigger. Not every single one will trigger. It'll depend at the end of the game which of these actually trigger, because you'll see that there's 4 available, but only 2 of them will actually score. The other 2 will not be scored. So that's all determined at the end of the game based on how the story kind of played out. Okay. So there are a few different types of these kind of inter-chapter changes. I know as well that Lesser Evil includes some more additional chapters. It deals with the drafting board, so it changes things dramatically from that. So I'm now going to shift into my discussion point, where I'm going to talk about overall thoughts and feelings about the mechanics of this game and give you my final thoughts so you guys can make that decision. And before we get to that point, I definitely want to make sure we notice that this is a prototype that I played, so all the components are subject to change, of course. So the things I'm mentioning could change in the final product. I don't know, and that's why this isn't necessarily a review. I'm just giving you my thoughts based on my impressions of playing this game. The first thing I want to really hammer down is I was really impressed with the play time for this game. I know that's not something I really ever talk about, but it's actually refreshing to play a game that was completed in roughly about an hour. Being able to get a full experience with a narrative story, a fun little tableau system here, and complete that within an hour was a very refreshing take. I know with all the big box games we've been getting lately and talking about, having something that's palatable could almost be an end of game palate cleansing system was refreshing. So I want to make sure I talked about that, because I don't feel like people really talk about game length when it comes to an overall experience. But at the core of the game, I want to talk about the card play, because that's really the crux of it. I didn't really discuss what all the symbols mean, but let's break down some of these cards and kind of give an idea what we're looking at. So every card will have a top section, which includes the banner of the color, any type of resources that this card is gaining you, and then half the time, not always, but sometimes they will have below that powers or an ability that this card will trigger. So this is saying if I get rid of a magic, I can get 2 envelopes. The equal symbol says if you have exactly that many banners, so this is asking me if I have exactly 1 yellow banner, I can get 3 experience points. And alternatively, this is the one that says delete a sword or a combat token, and you'll get 2 of whatever the white banner is, the white directional signpost token is. So the core of the game, the real idea of what we're doing here, is we're playing these cards from our hand into our tableau, trying to maximize as many points as we can get at a time. And right now, the maximum amount of reward that you can get per card is 3 of a thing. 3 experience points or 3 tokens. That's pretty much the gold standard. So when it comes to drafting or when it comes to playing cards, almost always I felt like if you weren't trying to maximize your play hand for 3 points of some sort, you have to try to get as many tokens and resources as possible through that. Now, I do like that some of these powers and abilities, in terms of the card play, will affect some of those things. So, for example, Lady of Time and Space, it's the 3rd ability that Ciri gets, says return 1 card from your tableau into your hand, and then you may play 1 card from your hand to your tableau. So if I had a card that's just super bonkers good, and I can trigger it twice, so let's say I had something like this, and I already played this card, I can now draw it back and play it again, and double trigger this card to basically, maximize those points. And then I would flip this token over to show that I have used my ability in that row, and it's no longer available to me for the rest of this game. All of these powers and abilities are one-time uses as of right now. Basically, they're a powerful effect that can change the course of the game one time, and we all have access to those. So yeah, the card play is fun. I liked the challenge of looking at my hand, looking at what's available on the draft board, and figuring out how can I maximize my cards to play to this, to play towards this, to also play towards the story, and as well as my end game scoring. And I got to the point where if I had an end game scoring such as yellow cards, all yellow cards I would just put to the side. I'm not going to play those because I need those for victory points. So that's really the crux of it. I think the card play is fun when it comes down to it. When it comes down to finding ways to draft the right cards, to maximize your points, that is the game. I already touched on that I liked the experience, the way the experience works kind of in terms of the card play. But I do want to hammer down that I really, really liked the asymmetrical play that every character has. Each character plays a little differently based on their asymmetrical. There's a little take that when it comes to Dandelion's character, but it's pretty minor. But it was like the only person that had some sort of take that. So it was a little weird because you're like, oh, weird. No one else punishes people while yours actively takes something away. So that's something to note. Maybe that'll get changed. I don't know. It just seemed kind of odd that there was no other take that in the system. But overall, I did like the asymmetrical special powers and abilities. Now, from there, let's talk about the narrative, because that's the other portion of this game that's going to be holding it up. This is a Witcher game. All of this stuff, the card play things, doesn't necessarily scream Witcher. So what is bringing us into the IP other than the characters? It's got to be the story. Now, the stories, these are known stories from the Witcher novels. So some of these, like Striga, was in the Netflix TV series as well. I can't remember, because it's been so long since I've watched the Netflix show, if the Edge of the World was featured in the Netflix show. But these are stories that have been told previously. Now, what that means is one of these endings will coincide to what actually happened in the book. So that's kind of cool. But alternatively, there's going to be, say, 7 other endings that are not normal to how they happened. And so reading through the narratives and how you get there is kind of cool. You know, be like, okay, so we're going to now, instead of doing diplomacy, we're actually going to go explore the castle. But it's all through written, you know, text in terms of, so you really have to be imaginative and to read the story and read it through. And they're also not very detailed. Like the first part of the lore, the story aspect, is a pretty good read. It's about a 4 to 5 minute read, maybe 3 to 4 minute read. It's not too long. Alternatively, once you get through and you make your decisions in terms of the directional paths, they're about like a minute or so of reading out loud to the group. So they're not terribly long in terms of a narrative push, but they're enough to give you kind of a sense of what's happening. And then as you get to the epilogue of the story, that's again another 2, maybe 2.5, 2 minutes and 45 seconds of reading, as it says what your decisions basically led to this outcome. So if you like the Witcher feel, if you like the Witcher stories, that's going to be a very positive element. But if you're a person who's like, this is supposed to be for, you know, we'll take that section for the actual portion of the video. It's about things people might not like. One of the things I also wanted to mention, in terms of gameplay, whenever there's a question of the decision-making process points, you know, do I draft higher on this track to get higher initiative? Do I go lower for victory points or a better card? I like those decision points. I also really like the decision points when it comes to the victory point track versus the experience track. I think that's a really, really cool way to balance out the way the game plays. Some players might just blitz and go for a lot of victory points and try to get as many points as they can early, while, you know, foregoing getting the powers and abilities because maybe they don't see the value in that. While other players might be like, I want to get these powers and abilities as soon as I can so I can maximize my turns and get the most out of my tableau building experience. There's a really cool balancing act there, and I like that it's based on some of the cards give you experience points. They don't give you victory points, but I do like that it's really balanced on which is the dominating icon versus the non-dominating icon will give you those rewards. So I thought that was really cool. The next thing, the side quests over here that were kind of included in some of the quests were actually fun little distractions. The original base game that we played one time with nothing in it, was really kind of bare. So it's, you know, it did include one expansion. Let's see if I can find it. Of course I can't find it now. Here it is. It included this expansion, which would give additional rewards based on if you set a certain path of tokens, and these would change. There would be 3 total ones, and they would get increasingly more difficult as the game went on. That's not what I was looking for. So this one, there was one that was like this, and I felt like that was maybe like introduction. But as we played other chapters, we got to experience more and more of the more complex things being added, and I thought that was really cool. I would love to see if they're going to include any other modules to change up the gameplay in terms of victory scoring or directions you might take. That would be super cool to be able to add that in to give you a little bit more difference and change in the gameplay scoring. The other thing I want to talk about, the last thing that I thought was really, really cool, was the way this drafting board is set up and the way you have this order is really powerful to show how impactful the initiative order is in terms of who's going first. So as I mentioned, we go to our draft spots. Whoever's the highest will then return back to the initiative order like this. So while this character was the first to go and he was able to get down here, now he's going to be the last. So now if we wanted to, Dandelion can actually come down here and get that experience buff. Siri can come up here because maybe she wants to be first player. And then this person can also go up there, guarantee themselves second player because they're behind Siri. This initiative track is super cool. I like the intuitive nature of it, but the power of it, because it also determines tie order. Whoever is the highest on the initiative track will always break ties. So I thought that was really, really cool in terms of how they want to push you to always want to be the highest on the initiative track, which is also drawing the top of the deck, which is the worst because in a drafting game, getting random cards isn't always the strongest option. So from there, let's talk about some of the things I didn't like necessarily while playing this game. So one of the things, and I brought this up to them when I played this the first time at Gen Con, the narrative stories. Sometimes I felt like the narrative stories lacked agency for the players in terms of what the direction we're going to go. You see, we're playing two separate games here, I feel like. You've got the drafting tableau building game, which is the main core of the game. It is the core gameplay loop that we are experiencing. Drafting cards, playing cards, getting victory points, getting tokens, and then we reference up here and see, okay, what did I get more of? A lot of the times, your decisions in terms of the cards that you're picking and the cards that you're playing, they're not going to be tied into, am I wanting to go exploration path or am I wanting to go magic path? It's what do I have access to get more of either one of those tokens. Doesn't matter which one, but if the cards in my hand are going to direct me that I'm going to get more exploration tokens, I'm going to play those because it's the only way I'm going to get more points in the game. And I feel like there's a real disconnect there from the narrative aspect of the game. While I still enjoy reading and being like, okay, what happened? There's a real disconnect in terms of the agency of the decision path that I made correlating into a story that I would like to see. I've seen this in other games as well that I just feel that real disconnect. So it's an unfortunate part, especially because the other leg of this three-legged horse is being held up by this narrative story aspect. And I think it's the weakest part of the experience because it doesn't really matter what you did in the game to what was going on here. Now alternatively, you could be like, I really want to push an exploration. I just don't think you're going to do as well point-wise for the game. And so you could play this game as, let's play it like we want, as how we want to affect the story. I just see that as hampering yourself or playing with your hand behind your back kind of an experience. The other thing, now at the back of the rule book, it lists all of the different abilities that these cards can do. And while it seems like there's a lot, and maybe there is, they're pretty intuitive in terms of when you learn what the systems and what the cards mean. It really did at times feel like a lack of combos or of cool interactions that we could trigger through the tableau building experience. It's very much a one level system of play 2 cards, remove something, get bonus. There wasn't any depth or layers on top of that to be like, okay, so I'm going to play this card, which is going to trigger this, and because I have this card already in play, I get to now return this card to my hand. Who knows what that is, but layers of combos of previous cards and trying to set up a path, and also drafting cards that go into maybe an archetype that you're trying to build. So the tableau building card play system, while it is a fun puzzle, it does lack that that depth that I would love to have seen in terms of setting up a system. And I don't want to get into the root of like what I would have done because I'm not the designer of this game, but I love the idea that these cards are supposed to be representing the actions you're taking in the conflict here. Like, am I fighting? Am I building up my combos, or am I using my spells? I can't remember what they're called, to influence something. I don't know. I thought it was cool, the idea of it, and I just wish it would translate into more of that depth of a level. So from there, let's wrap this up and let's talk about some of the things I think I could see people not liking. And the first one, based off the last point we just talked about, the lack of card play depth. I think based on all the plays I've had with a wide group of people who have experienced this game, the resounding feedback I got was it just felt light. And that's not a problem. There's nothing wrong with a light game. I mentioned at the top of this first impressions video that I really appreciated the fact that it was an hour-long experience, wasn't heavy, and it's a very easy game to teach someone who's new to the game. I could sit down someone and be like, I'm going to teach you this game in 8 minutes, and we'll be good to go. I like that, and having a light game is great for that. And so for someone who is coming from, say, the old world, The Witcher, the old world, also by Go On Board, which is a little bit more heavy, still light in some ways, in my opinion, but a little bit more meatier of a game, to say, you know what, if you want to get the Witcher experience, this is a great option for you at a light, I would say, entry level, gateway plus. So it's not a gateway game, but it's like a gateway plus. It's like it's to the people who are in the second stage of introductions to board games, which is, in my opinion, a great place for a IP-based game. Something that a lot of people could understand and get into, that's not going to be a 60-minute rule book read as you're trying to explain the game to people. So there are values to that. But I can see people, especially in the world of the crowdfunding world we live in, not necessarily loving the fact that this is a bit of a lighter experience. I bet you I'll be seeing those comments when this game eventually launches, going through the comment section, people asking and commenting on the gameplay. I don't know what the campaign page is going to look like. I mentioned that at the beginning of the video. I don't know if there's going to be any changes to the gameplay or if there's any expansions to add more cards. So all of this could be for naught. But I just want to make sure people are aware of the core mechanics of the game, alternatively on top of what we're looking at here. One of the other features that I want to talk about is, let's play 6 cards. So at the end of a round, say the first round of gameplay, you'll have played 6 cards into your tableau. So this would be my tableau. I have triggered all of these cards, collecting resources and bonuses and points from it. I think that's cool. I like I said, I talked about that. I like that stuff. I like doing those things. But what's so jarring for me, especially with a game like this, is to then say, okay, you can keep one of these cards. So you're going to take this. You're going to get rid of all of these. These are all going to go away. And now you're going to be starting over with the 5 cards you still have in your hand, because you have cards in your hand, plus what's drafting. The cards also don't escalate. There's no like tier 1 cards, tier 2 cards, tier 3 cards. So it's not like tier 2, we're going to get more powerful cards. And then in the final round, round 3, we get really powerful cards. It's all the same cards. You're just erasing and starting over. In the second round, you will be able to trigger. You'll keep 2 cards, and you'll actually be able to trigger your cards as if you had played them. So you can come up with a better solution or a better activation trigger. It's still so weird for me and jarring. I don't want to say weird, because this is obviously the system this uses, but it's just so kind of foreign to me to do something that when you're trying to build up an engine, to be like, okay, slash your engine, keep a portion, and now we're going to start over with the exact same cards. So that was kind of a unique experience. Not necessarily bad, but something that I could see people not necessarily in love with. And again, the final thing I want to talk about, because I think it's important, is just the lack of agency when it comes to the story. I think there are going to be some people who are going to buy this game for the idea that they get to play stories and live through the narrative, and their decisions and their choices through the game are going to matter in that regard. And again, you could play that way if you want. I just don't think that's the optimal way to play. And I think there are going to be people who are disappointed by that realization. Hopefully they watch this video and get a good idea so they're prepared for what the experience will be. And hopefully there's a bunch more of these chapters we get to experience as well, because that'd be super cool. But just know that they're not necessarily, you're not actually controlling the direction, because you've got 3. Now, alternatively, this is different in solo. And I didn't play solo. So if you're a solo player, I have no idea how solo works. I don't really play solo. But you have to also consider you are playing against 2 or 3 or even 4 other players who are all playing their cards and getting their points, and whatever ones they are more in are going to be the determining factor of which direction you go into. So you are just a piece of the cog of the direction aspect. So if you're like, I really don't want to kill the Striga, I want to figure out a way to cure the curse, but everyone else plays swords and kills the Striga, you're out of luck, because it's just going to go based off the dominating aspect of it. So that is going to wrap up the section of what I think people might not like. Let's wrap up in terms of what I would love to see, because I am excited for this campaign. But what do I want to see? I would love to see more complex cards. The actual amount of cards that were given to us for gameplay for the prototype was low, especially for what I would expect a tableau builder to be. Multiple times during not multiple times, but almost every single time in a 4-player gameplay, even in the 3-player gameplays, we'd have to reshuffle the deck in the discard, because we would run out of cards because of the amount of cards you're constantly drafting through. So I would love to see more cards, more combinations. Alternatively, the core box, as far as I'm aware, is only going to have 3 total chapters. I would love to see more chapter stories for us to play with. I'm not positive if they have the ability to make new, fresh stories that are in the Witcher universe. But that would be cool if they could. Or alternatively, I would love to see stories that are from the Witcher 3 Xbox game or video game. They use assets from the video game. Like, these art assets are basically the assets from the video game. So it would be like, I would love to see the 3 Crones story or something to that regard that are part of the Witcher 3 story, which I think would be super cool. Maybe have experiences on some of the other islands that we've gone to, like Skellige. I think that'd be super cool. So there's a lot of options. In terms of the player characters, right now there are 5 total characters that are all well known. I could potentially see more playable characters becoming available. There are several mages that are not in this game. So you could have Trist as a playable character. I know that the follow now option is a Geralt of Rivia like mounted, which is a whole unique character board. So that's cool. So I could see more character boards. I not necessarily think that they're needed, but the asymmetrical powers and abilities are one of the bigger factors of this game that I really like. So that would be cool just to have more options. But what I would really, really like to see is just more combos and abilities from the decks to experience, more stories so that we have more replayability options, and overall just more content. Something I talk about is this is a good amount of stuff in terms of the base. I just want more of the good stuff. Just give me more good stuff. I don't need a bunch more minis. We don't need a bunch more stuff to clog up the box space and to take up more Calyx space. What I need is just more cards and content that I can experience fresh, new stuff through the gameplay system. So that's it. I'm going to wrap it up. My name is Brian. I hope you guys appreciate this type of coverage where I dive really hard into a campaign to give you guys my overall thoughts of this so you can make the best decisions when you're backing games for your own collection. Let me know in the comment section what you think, or if you don't like it, let me know, because I would love to know too on that regard. If you want to support the channel, we would love your support. You can go to my Patreon down below. Any support there is greatly appreciated. But if you just want to join the community, become part of the Game Brigade group, we have a Discord that's free to join. Just look in the description down below. And all of the information regarding my disclosures and everything is always in the description down below as well. So you can check that out for your convenience in terms of all of the videos I've done. So thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it. My name is Brian from Game Brigade.